This is the Outliers Edge podcast, where we champion the leaders who are shaping the next era of humanity by taking them to the edge of their comfort zone so that they can lead us to the edge of what's next. I'm your host, Niiamah Ashong. Let's do this. Hey there, Niiamah Ashong here, and welcome to Outliers Edge, where we champion the leaders who are shaping the next era of humanity. Now, I got to be honest with you. Every time I come on and I say that, where we champion the leaders who are shaping the next era of humanity, I realize that I step into that definition and that proclamation 1% more. Today, we have a chance to talk to someone who is shaping the next era of humanity in his own way. And it's really fun because we're going to be talking to Alex Barker. And Alex and I have known each other for years, almost a decade now. Yeah. And it's 10 like years. 10 years. I'm like, oh, wow. And we met in entrepreneurial circles. We met through podcasting. We've been growing over the last 10 years. And it's great to be in this conversation with you, Alex, because I do see the work that you're doing as something that shifts and change the way that like humanity is going to be open up, the way that you're creating accessibility to pharmacists and beyond, right? I'll give you a chance to kind of talk about that, but I do want to make sure that I do call that into this room. I see that. There's another thing that I see about you though that also helps me feel like I see how you are shaping the next era of humanity. That's how you show up as a man. Like in our conversations, when I connect with you, we've been able to connect on business, but as a person, you are both genuine, you are full, you are open-hearted, and at the same time, you're also clearly determined. I've seen the way that like you talk about and cherish your family, how you put your priorities in order, and how you build a team that supports the unique way that you go about doing business and making things work for you, while also cherishing those that are around you. So from that perspective here, like, I'm happy. I'm honored, actually, beyond happy. I am honored to be on this and be in this conversation with you, Alex. It's good to talk to you.
Pro tip for anyone listening to this: if you just want to feel good about yourself, just become a guest on this show.
Yeah. Oh, it's actually really funny because I've had friends who are like, "You need to stop doing that. You need to stop speaking me into the world." And I made the mistake of listening to them, Alex. I made the mistake. Yeah. I was like, oh, I guess this is making you feel uncomfortable. I'm like, you need to know. Now I'm like, I don't have time. The world does not have time for you not to own who you are. And this is who you are to me. And I can own it first.
I think there's a really good space for podcasting just to acknowledge, who a person is. Hopefully it doesn't bring up shame or guilt in the person, right?
You know what? And if it does, like we can handle that too. We can handle that as well.
Well, no, I appreciate everything you said. And I feel it. For those of you who've never heard of me, I founded a company in 2017 called The Happy PharmD, and we help pharmacists transform their careers and their lives. For those of you unawares of what's going on in pharmacy, the vast majority of them are struggling. Many are miserable and burned out. 50 to 70% of them are burned out clinically. And these are doctorate level professionals who are fully capable of helping others and enjoying what they do, but are in systems of oppression, I would call them, and cause them all sorts of horrible things, from depression, anxiety, divorce, and even suicide. So our company is built around helping them revitalize their careers and get into jobs that they love, and in turn creates a huge impact, not just for them, but for their families, for their communities, and ultimately for our fractured profession. And so since then, we've helped, I think 1,500 pharmacists, I think, somewhere over that. And it's been a wild ride. I've written a book called Indispensable about it. And we're doing research things. Like it's wild, because I'm thinking back to when I first met you after I graduated, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have the happy PharmD back then. And I fantasized about what it would be like to run a business and to do the things that I've done. And now, here I am on this podcast talking about it. Like, oh, I wish I could go back in time and talk to that young boy and tell him all sorts of things, like invest in Bitcoin and some of the lessons I've learned. But maybe we can talk about those in this podcast.
we might, but and I like to think that had you gone and told that younger version of yourself any of that, we may not be in this conversation right here.
Oh, sure. Right. Yeah.
Like there are so many things. I'm going to honor the reality of this moment here. Honor you for what you've created here. And also, just as we start off here, I realize that my podcasts actually do end up being spaces of acknowledgement. And that's something that ends up being different from other conversations that I have. I'm like, let's make sure we call out the greatness that's here so we can start from there and move forward, right? Because the people who are watching this resource, listening to this here, they are also excellent people creating out in the world right now. They're not the person that you were 10 years ago. They're your peer right here. So it's nice to be able to like be in this conversation and start from that place. And what I want to say is like, it's really great hearing you owning your impact, and not only you owning your impact, but hearing you describe the journey that you help people through the Happy PharmD. Like I felt it. I felt moved. I could feel it viscerally. And it wasn't just like, I have a company that's online that like has courses and does this stuff. It was like, no, but like if someone looked at the features of what was there, if someone looked at what it is, they might see those kind of things. But you are in tune to like the level of impact that you showing up and your business shows up, and the level of impact that has on individual people in their lives or livelihood. I'm starting this conversation immediately moved. And I want to call that into this room here, because you've elevated the work that you do. There's tactical, practical things that you do in the business to make sure that this takes place. But I honor you for being so in depth and in touch with the true nature of the impact that you're making through the work you're doing.
Well, thank you. It feels good. And it feels good to perpetuate positive thought cycles, I think, about it, because I think if there's anything a daunting task that a leader has to do, there's a lot of fear and worry and negativity about how things may be perceived, what people will say, and just actually, it's on my to-do list today to print out a thank you message that I received from an association president just last week, about the work that I did for them, and made me realize I need to put in my life more of the positive thoughts, because it's very easy to like get caught up in doubting oneself, right? And believing the lies that your thoughts tell you, that stop you from making even more impact. It's very, I find that a lot of my coaching sessions with my coaches often centered around the objections that I have about my big dreams and ambitions. And I think a lot of people in leadership positions, I don't know if they acknowledge it as much. I know in pharmacy, it's not really acknowledged. It's kind of just presumed. I'm not sure if that's the same thing that you've run into when working with leaders as well.
Yeah, I think there's two elements to what you're saying. There's sometimes I'll meet with leaders who are kind of looking to maintain or slightly elevate and incrementally elevate like how things have been, right? They're in the position of leadership, but they're not actually like embodying what leadership is. They're not trying to take it to something new. That their big dream is like really a goal that they had, that they set for the year, or maybe that was even set for them through their organization or board of directors, right? Like, so I want to first distinguish, like, when you talked about like making even more impact. I think that there's a different space. I think that there's certain challenges that feel different. It's all the same leadership challenges, but it has a different feel to it. When you're like, things are already good. I'm like, I get that that this is working, but can I take it even further? Who am I to do that? Like, am I not appreciating what I've already accomplished? Like, to me, what comes like, would I be just like would I be considered like a prick or someone for like not enjoying what I have, or taking in what is here already? And am I not able to actually like just be with the level of impact? Like, is this not enough? Why does there need to be more? So when you're talking about that, like, those are the kinds of conversations that come up with me when I'm talking with leaders here, where they're like, we're in a space, things are good. How do we make even more impact? And then those are some like the mindset questions, some of the questions that don't typically get voiced, because like, who's there to hear it? You know, who's there for it? You actually, before we hit record, you mentioned something that brought me back to this last week. I had just spent a week doing an intensive, working on myself as a coach, as well as leading groups of individuals and leaders through their transformation. And one of the things that it was almost like an intensive within the intensive. There was a major thing going on, but then I had my experience as well as a leader. And one of the things I recognized through it was, I was sitting in a group call, and I brought up something. I said, hey, you know, I forget exactly what it was that I said, but it was something along the lines of like, I'm not necessarily sure what my mission is, or I'm not necessarily sure like like there was something in there.
Yeah.
Around that in that vein. And someone in the group just came out and was like, BS, Niiamah. BS. You know exactly what your mission is. You know exactly what's coming next year. You're playing this thing here where you actually know everything that you want to get done. Let's just talk about how to help you get done what you want to get done. And it shook me in like in the kind of way that not that knocked me off my feet, but you know, those moments where you're like, well, I'm going to sit up straighter because someone can see me here. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And it got me thinking when you mentioned earlier about like the things that you've built, the things that have come easy, like creating. My tendency is to create artificial roadblocks, challenges, and basically adopt other people's problems about what's hard for them as though it is my own. And I'm like, I guess, well, I think I would have this problem. I don't have it, but like this so-and-so had it, and I'm in the same room with them. So I guess I should probably figure out how to figure that out.
Oh yeah. I've got to fix that. Oh wow, that's an issue that I have.
Yeah.
Am I addicted to that? Wow. You must be an empath then, yeah?
I have some of that. You know what it is? I'm a chameleon. It's one of my greatest strengths, but when I'm not paying attention to it, I'll go into a room, I'll say, what is safe? What is acceptable? What is, what's the way that leadership looks like in here? Oh, is it deep, powerful, like intimate leadership? Or is it like, this is how many subscribers I have. This is this, I've done this, I've done that. Whatever it is, I know how to read a room and to blend in on it. But what happens then is that I accidentally take on, or I unknowingly take on that which is not me.
Well, it makes it easy to get along with people, but it does make it probably harder than to identify what would make the most impact for you. Yeah. Right. I think it makes you a great coach, but it also at the same time probably creates a lot of leadership struggles for you.
Yeah, I think that the thing that it does here, it's counterintuitive. It makes me great to a certain extent, right? It's like I can coach the people who are struggling with what I've struggled with, who are like, you know, like it makes it so easy to connect with so many people who are at that level. However, the people who are playing the game of how do I make even more impact? I'm already here. I'm already touching hundreds of thousands of lives, millions of lives. Like, and what's that like? What's the way either I make more impact or I take better care of myself and put in less effort to make that same impact, you know? That doesn't connect with them, right? And that's there's something about that I'm like really just owning into and just saying like I'm done pretending that a lot of this stuff is difficult for me. It's not difficult overall, but for me.
I think I can relate in a different way.
Tell me.
I've always had a chip on my shoulder, like something. I've always like felt the need that I had to prove something that wasn't ever there. Ever since I was a kid, I was obsessed with gaining people's attention through comedy and laughter. I was voted class clown. I made like comedic videos for my friends and for school projects, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And my detention school record like is evidence of my frivolity, the just how I treated the academic school system. And that, for whatever reason, was like a bad juxtaposition into becoming a pharmacist. For those of you that are like have never met one, you know, pharmacists typically they're rule followers. You want them to be. You don't want them goofing off with your narcotic meds.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt that all during my training and even as a professional, like I just don't belong with this crowd. I do not fit in. I'm odd. I'm weird. And I can't seem to play the game that everyone else is playing so well, which ultimately led me to pursue, you know, a very different career path than most pharmacists, choosing the entrepreneurial route. And I admittedly, like when I met you back in 2012, I was rejecting my own self-identity. My chip on my shoulder was, I'm a pharmacist and I kind of hate myself for doing this. And I wanted to leave it all behind. I for 5 years, I pursued so many different ideas that had, I mean, a little hints of what makes me great. It had hints of things that I could do well, but it wasn't until the end of 2016 that I came face to face with my shame, my chip, and said, I'm a pharmacist. I did this. I can reject it, or I can accept this, and I can lean into it, and I can create something and run with it and give it everything that I got. And I did. I did. In 2017, that's when I launched, you know, this company. And I said, I'm a pharmacist. And by the way, I think I'm a bad one. And that message, like, it resonated with people. My audience all of a sudden, like, started like leaning in and saying, what are you saying? Because I was saying what everyone was thinking, but not willing to publicly say. The chapter of my book, Indispensable, it's like the first or second chapter. The title is I'm a Terrible Pharmacist. And it's the chapter that people talk about. It's the chapter where people say, I have thought these things, or I've wondered these things before. And by leaning into my chip, my shame, my guilt, I was able to like capture my audience's attention. I was able to like harness the inner voice of what I thought and what they thought. And it felt so good to just accept me for who I was, that I'm not going to be the best ever clinical pharmacist who's taking care of patients and helping them with their healthcare. But instead, what I could be is I could be a pharmacist who helps other pharmacists, because no one out there seems to be doing that. And I'm so glad that I was able to like come face to face with my shame and lean into who I was, rather than create this version of myself that's this inspiring leader for people that may or may not get me, which was the struggle for 5 years.
Yeah.
I remember talking with you about this over that time period. Like, oh, I've got this new idea, and I'm doing this new podcast. I'm doing this new platform. I'm doing this new thing, and it's going to be so amazing. Because every new idea I had was so amazing, and they did well. My ideas did well, but I never really committed to any one of them.
Yeah. And I'm hearing a couple of different things as you're saying this. One of them, I'm hearing there was a time in 2016 where there was a level of, like, your commitment just shifted. It wasn't like, it's like, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And not even, and so this is what I'm going to do. But what I'm also hearing is that was also coupled with, like, and this is who I am. Not this is who I'm going to be, but like, this is who I am. Like there was a present state Alex that was just like, I'm a bad pharmacist. I'm a great entrepreneur, and I can help people. Let me bring all those things together and like, and do that and be that, because that's who I am, and do that, commit to doing that really, really well, and figuring out whatever it takes to be able to make that happen.
Yeah. It's a backwards way of like becoming a leader. Probably. I think a lot of,
like, in what way? Tell me about the backwards way. Makes me smile, because a lot of the people that I lead, like your story is not too dissimilar from the people who I actually consider to really lead it, right? They're willing to say what no one else will say. Like, seriously, right?
Yeah,
but like that's, like you said it, like, you're like, people think it, but like they don't say it. And you said you made it the first chapter of your book.
Yeah.
People start with that.
I think when I think of the traditional leader,
yeah,
because I went through your podcast and I listened to some people, and many of them have gone what I would call the traditional way to leadership. You work in a job, you do a good job, you probably get promoted because you do a good job, and then all of a sudden, you have to start learning different skills in management and leadership that you've never practiced before, right? And some get it, some don't. Those with the soft skills capable of leadership, progress further, right? That's kind of how the capitalism system works. It rewards good performance. In my case, I did not perform well in the traditional sense. I mean, I got raises, I got opportunities to perform in different capacities, but I never thought, oh man, I could be well, no, that's not true. I did consider management. I did consider leadership, because I knew my ability to like handle people was better than my actual clinical performance. So I rejected that path because I thought that seems painful. And what seems way more fun is to carve out my own path with my creativity. And so that when I think it, like, I went backwards in my own viewpoint, right? I didn't choose I'm not an executive in a C-suite. I don't lead a 1,000-person organization that someone else built. I just built my own thing. And now I lead my own group of, I don't know, 20 some odd people. And it's way more fulfilling for me than being a part of a structure that I may or may not have a whole lot of influence over. So that's what I guess I mean by backwards.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate you slowing down into that, because it's interesting to me. I find that I like to surround myself with what I call unconventional leaders. Like that you almost couldn't have predicted where they ended up. At the same time, when you hear where they're at, you're like, oh yeah, like I saw that. I could see that in you. Like, so let's we're playing this game of 2012 back then. I was still working in consulting as an actuarial consultant, helping people with like retirement plans. And I remember I would meet people and they're like, you're an actuary? Like you? I don't think I've ever said it. Like, I wasn't good at it because my heart wasn't there. I was good enough. Like, I passed enough exams. Yeah. But I failed every single one of them at least once. One of them, I think I failed like 3 times in a row, So the element of like, it's useful to me to have the paradigm of like the backwards way to leadership for you. Cause it's like, it doesn't really like, it just feels not the upward linear promotion of I've been in this one place. I've grown. I've gotten to the pinnacle of where I could be inside of this organization by high performance. And now I'm looking to go do something on my own. And I need to build new skills for whatever that happens to be, whether it's I'm getting promoted, like to go lead an office somewhere, or I'm going to go start up my own thing. You're like, from the very beginning of this year, you started in it. Your performance was okay. You're getting by, and then you took a left turn and said, I'm going to go do some other thing. Then I'm hearing from you for 5 years. It wasn't backwards. It was squiggly line. It was up. It was down. It was, I'm trying this. I'm running full ahead, all that stuff. Yeah. And then you came back and said, okay, how do I incorporate all that I've learned over the last 5 years from entrepreneurship and couple that with what, like, the world that I had known prior to entrepreneurship and put them together?
I could tell a story that, yes, it was a squiggly line to a straight one, but that's not really what it was.
Keep going.
It was my shame. And it was me coming face to face with it, because I remember distinctly telling friends in December 2016, I should be further along than where I'm at today.
I wrote that down earlier for me. I was like, when you talked about shame, and I'm going to invite anyone that's watching this right now to, like, what is the shame? What's the thing that you're thinking that you wouldn't say out loud, right? Like just write that down, because like, we're here as leaders. There are people that are following us, and this is the truth. I wrote down right here. It said, I should be further along than I am right now. That's a shame that I carry with me. Continue, Alex.
There's something powerful in just writing down what that thought is. Your future self will thank you a million times over if you overcome it. When it was a feeling built up over time. I think in 2016, I was working on 2 major projects on the side while working a full-time job, 45, 50 hours a week, and then working early mornings, a few evenings, and weekends on the side hustles that I had. And I believed in them. I thought they would work. But I remember telling my group of friends, this is what's coming up for me right now. I'm a little jealous of, like, you guys. I'm jealous of other people a lot. And I feel no closer to really where I want my life to be. And through conversations, through a lot of journaling and self-discovery in December, I realized I let my creativity get the better of me, and I come up with new ideas all the time, and I follow them for about 6 to 12 months, and then I give up. Like, that is the consistent thing in my life. So I need, if I want to continue that, I can, but I don't think it's going to help me get where I want to be. So I'm going to try something different. I'm going to commit to something for 18 months. It's going to be one thing, and it's going to be pharmacy related, because I keep having success in pharmacy related things by using my skills that I'm great at. And I'm going to lean into it with everything I got. And if it doesn't reach the goal that I have set out for myself, I will give up on it. I'll give up on it, knowing that I gave it everything I had. Because with every single idea I had previously, every trial, every new and amazing idea that I fell in love with, I would not give it my everything. And by everything, I mean my focus, my attention, not deviate from. And this was that the Happy Farm D was the first thing that I said yes to and no to everything else. If it wasn't related to this thing, then I said no, which I wasn't accustomed to. I was accustomed to diversifying, my assets, diversifying my endeavors, thinking, well, if this doesn't work out, then this could work out. If this, fails, then don't worry, I still have this. And sure enough, I reached my income goals within 10 months. And then I was able to leave my job in 2018 to do this stuff full time. And for the first time ever, take a 3-week vacation, which my job would never let me do. And the following year, take a 3-month sabbatical. So like the hard work, the hustle paid off. And like I'm pleasantly pinkly plum happy to be where I'm at today. All of that hard work finally paid off to create a system that allows me to be the leader I want to be, not stuck in some system that I can't change. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's absolutely wonderful.
I feel it. And what's also wonderful is like we started off here with just like how others are benefiting because you decided to go on, like, not because you were courageous enough to confront your shame. And it's one of the things I think you talked about. Like, I was curious. I'm like, what was your process of this? You talked to your friends, you got in conversations, you journaled. There's a lot of times where like, I'm going to use this the things that most people don't get to hear about me is like I think that conversations are one of the most important things that can happen. I'm like, if anything, I would be known as a conversation Sherpa. It's free, like it's available to anyone. And if someone's willing to actually be in conversation, to say what needs to be said and to hear what isn't being said, like lives can change. Right. I say that and I say it to you and I know I believe in it. And at the same time, I also know like the voice in the back of the head. It's like, but it's not a thing. It's not you haven't like, what are you creating? A conversation? You just put time on people's calendar, So there's, as you say this, I do want to call out the power of that conversation. You talked about having like your coach here that you work with, and the levels of what that conversation actually ends up being. A number of people who want to think about how they can go and support entrepreneurs, CEOs, business leaders, and other people who are playing a big game in the world. And the conversation is not like, here goes strategically what you need to do or tactically what you need to do every time. Right. There's conversations around like, how do I actually unblock myself? How do I get out of my limit? How do I make a commitment to whatever is here? There's deeper levels of conversation that then ignite all the other tactics that are readily available. I'm typically like, if you want to know what to do, just Google it. If you actually did it, it probably would work. But there's a reason why you wouldn't do it. There's a reason why you wouldn't stick with it.
Yeah.
That's what we need to talk about. The information is out there, but like it feels like you really confronted yourself to like get some deeper insights and then act on those insights with commitment. I have a question. Yeah, good, Alex.
Well, I think there was a question in there, which was, how did I process it?
You spoke to that earlier. You talked about like being in conversations, like and externally confronting it. Like you told people, you're like, I'm jealous of you. you know? So like, but like that's tough, right? Let's call that out. That's why I say confronting. It's not like, that's why they want to like even to how do you process it? Because process it kind of feels like, oh, it's like, no, like like you gotta confront that. To go, like that's not an easy thing to say by default.
No, and I think that's what a lot of our audience struggles with is like feelings of regret. There's actually some really interesting studies in pharmacy that show that not only do a large portion of the students that graduate now say, I would not choose pharmacy again as my career path. Like these are students that are going to graduate with the degree. But many of them, we're talking like 40, 50% did not choose this career path as their first choice. Many of them wanted to be doctors or biologists or other things. So, you know, I'm the prototypical graduate. Like this was not my first choice. This was not what I thought I wanted. And I think there's shame in that, right? I have become something I did not originally want, because what I originally wanted to be was a comedian. I want, you know, before YouTube was a thing, I wanted to be a YouTuber. I wanted attention. I wanted people to laugh. And I didn't do that. I didn't lean into what made me me. I leaned into this other thing that I was also good at, which was test taking and getting A's, you know, like, oh yeah, that's good. Yeah. Oh, you can be a pharmacist. You can dispense drugs and tell people about them for $100K a year. Yeah, that sounds easy. I'll do that. Like that was my thought process. And that's not something you want to brag about. That's not something that you want to be proud of. And I think my community of people, like they want to help others. At the core of who they are, they want to help others, but they're stuck in a system, typically in a job workplace, that doesn't allow them to help other people. What a stuck and awful feeling that I felt, and what many people feel, and how liberating it is to break free from that, whatever it is, and be in a place where you actually help others and people value your opinion and they want to know your insights. And we do that on a daily basis. Like talk about, you know, ecstasy.
Yeah.
Talk about like a drug that is work. I'm addicted. I'm addicted. So being a voice in a place that where people are like professional and they don't want to say these things.
Yeah.
Talk about a way of being a leader. I don't think that when I do this work. I don't think like, oh yeah, I'm being a real leader here. I'm being the guy. Yeah. I'm being the voice that speaks to power, and you know, no one else can do as good of a job as I can. Like plenty of people can do this. Yeah. You know, I know there's nothing uniquely special about my kind of leadership. Anyone is capable of doing this. But it's I suppose it's my style. It is the way I say the things that I say that have led me to where I am. And it's not a journey I would advise anyone take lightheartedly, because leadership comes with its burdens, its pains, its regrets, its fears, its anxiety inducing conversations and work, you know, just problems. But at the end of the day, how great is it to know the lives you've changed and influenced and made better? What I think, I'm sure you've talked about this many times with leaders, is how easy it is to forget that and that impact. And you tend to just focus on the problems and the burdens and the failed attempts and the mistakes. But how great it is to just revel in doing a good job. That's perhaps the magic sauce of where your zone of genius is. When you can look back and see all the amazing things you've done and really say, this is where my leadership really is. When I can just do this, that's when I've made the biggest impact or made the best things happen in my career or my life. That's the true magic.
I'm feeling you on this, Alex. I really am. You even said like when you can look back. I like that element of like allowing yourself to just be, to lead, to show up, and not. I love your voice, by the way. I got a chance. I feel like I got a chance to actually hear your inner voice, the inner leader voice. I'm not a leader, like I'm the yeah. But I think it's a great message for us to close this conversation off on. Thanks for bringing in what really made a difference for you in terms of creating what you're creating here. I feel the level of care that you have for the people that you lead, for these pharmacists out there. I feel that you understand their pain and you let yourself call out that, like, to feel it and then call that out into the world in service of yourself and others. And I really feel like as this conversation goes on, I'm like, he really gets his people and he understands how to actually really support them. So I'm grateful for this conversation here. I want to end this conversation for anyone who is listening that wants to continue down the journey with you. Maybe they're a pharmacist, maybe they're thinking about it, maybe they know someone who's like, that person, this pharmacist in my life right now, like, is hurting and they need to spend more time with the Happy Farm Day. Like, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, everyone knows a pharmacist, right? You've probably been to Walmart or Target or any place, CVS, Walgreens, where you've seen a pharmacist. And I would encourage you just to do a favor for them and ask them, hey, are you doing okay? Because with the pandemic that happened recently, they're probably feeling overwhelmed and a little crazy. Just ask them, are you doing okay? And I hope you are. Because that would make the world of difference for them. For those of you that want to encourage those pharmacists, I want to give every pharmacist out there a care package. It's really for any pharmacist that's like, I just need a little bit of motivation. I need a little bit of encouragement. It's going to have two things in it. One is a digital copy of my book, Indispensable, a prescription for a fulfilling pharmacy career, where I talk about being a terrible pharmacist. And it's also going to give a lot of tips, strategies that we've learned over the years that help those pharmacists, as well as our pharmacist salary guide. Those things are going to help those pharmacists create an inspiring career where they are indispensable, because right now many feel dispensable. They can go there by going to thehappypharmd.com/care.
Thanks, Alex. It's actually, that's it. That's what I was feeling throughout here. That's what I feel is your style of leadership. Like, there's care that's embodied all the way through that.
That's so funny you say that, because I've been a jerk for most of my life.
I hear you. And my sentence still stands.
I say that because, I was so mean as a kid. I made fun of other people to get laughs. And it wasn't until I read like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that I changed that. And it feels nice to be support for a community of people that provide support for others. Because most pharmacists, they try to help everyone else, but not themselves. It feels good for you to say that to me. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, Alex, receive this. Like, we can joke about it, but it is true. Thank you for being you, Alex. Thank you for confronting you. Thank you for being there for your people. Please go to thehappyfarmd.com/care and continue this journey. Alex, I wish you the best. I wish you ongoing growth, and may your impact continue to grow, because it's helping people. It's helping people out in the world.
Thanks for having me.
Most certainly. I'll talk to you soon.
We're just getting started. Take 10 seconds to think about your greatest insight from today's conversation. And if you're ready to go and bring this to a deeper, more applicable level for you, come and join us in an upcoming masterclass. Go to outliersedge.com/masterclass to be coached live and to bring your aspirations, your goals, and your challenges and have them handled in real time. This is high flame, high impact, high transformation. Go to outliersedge.com/masterclass and come experience your next level of leadership.